As the Switch generation gently comes to a close, I think we need to take a moment to realize how just amazing this generation was, and how many just banger games the console has. So today I want to share with you guys my top 10 favorite games on the Nintendo Switch. This isn't going to be a ranked top 10 games video, because the games I mention in this video are just all completely different genres in most cases, so it makes it really hard to say, oh yeah, this one is better than this one because of XYZ, because they're not trying to achieve the same thing. So because of that, I'm going to go through all of these games in alphabetical order. And of course, this is far from being all of the good games on Switch. These are just, in my opinion, my favorite games on the console. But without further ado, let's go right into the video. The first game I'd like to talk about is Animal Crossing New Horizons. Because man, when I tell you the stars aligned for this game, wow, did the stars ever align for this game? The best way to describe this game is basically, this is Nintendo's version of The Sims. At the beginning of the game, you move onto your little island with a couple of animal companions. And over time, you start building your island and upgrading your house and decorating your house, creating your own little world to escape to. And boy, did people use this game to escape. Because it just so happened that this game was coming out right when the pandemic hit the world and everybody was stuck indoors. And it was exactly the type of game that the world needed at that moment. I quickly sank over 400 hours in this game. And the thing I find funny about all of this is 400 hours seems like a lot, but for really dedicated players, that is a laughable amount of time. There are so many people out there that have some like 5, 6, 7, even over 1,000 hours in this game. Some of my favorite memories with this game was hopping on a call with my friends and just playing for hours and hours and hours on end. And when I say hours, I mean sometimes I would literally fall asleep when they would still be talking to me. And like half an hour to an hour later, they would just still be patiently waiting for me on the phone just for, waiting for me to wake back up. Man, I just have so many positive memories with this game. And that's how it found its way onto this list. The next game on the list is Fire Emblem Engage. There are plenty of Fire Emblem games on Switch. However, there are only two that have the classic tactical turn-based combat that the series is known for. 3 if you want to count Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. However, considering Nintendo removed it from the eShop, I don't want to count it on this list. And although both Fire Emblem Three Houses and Fire Emblem Engage are great games, I must admit that personally I enjoyed Engage a lot more. For me, it comes down to what each game is trying to achieve. In Three Houses' case, their big emphasis is the story. So between both games, yeah, I do admit, Fire Emblem Three Houses probably has the better story because it's a bit deeper. Also, Three Houses is a lot more replayable because there's multiple different pathways you can take. Personally, I played Fire Emblem Three Houses 5 times. I played Black Eagle twice, I played Blue Lions once, and I played Golden Deer twice again. I have over 250 hours invested in this game, so by all means, it's not a bad game, but I just loved Engage so much more. Because the big emphasis for this game is the gameplay itself. First off, they brought back the weapon triangle, which is not something I felt like I missed that much in Three Houses, but once I played with it again and engaged, I'm like, wow, it really makes more of a difference. Because you approach battles just differently. You really need to make sure that you're sending the correct type of unit in the correct direction, or else you could be toast. And of course, in Three Houses, there was still advantages of sending certain units to fight other certain type of units as well, but in Engage is just so much deeper. And then there's the Engage mechanic, which basically makes certain units be able to supercharge. And although it did make some of the units just absolutely busted, it was a mechanic that was just so fun to play with. So although the focus with Three Houses is mainly the story, I do feel like it gets really repetitive, especially if you do multiple routes. Because in the first half of the game is pretty similar, you're only going to see the bigger changes on the second half of the game. But you're still fighting on a lot of the same maps, just sometimes in a slightly different order, and it just feels repetitive. Again, not really an issue if you play the game only once or twice, but if somebody wants to take in the full experience and do every single route, on your final playthroughs you might experience deja vu. So although I technically spent a lot less time with Fire Emblem Engage, the time I did spend with it, I enjoyed myself a lot more. And that is why Fire Emblem Engage is one of my favorite games on the Nintendo Switch. The next awesome game on the Nintendo Switch is Kirby and the Forgotten Land. When it comes to releasing Kirby games, Nintendo is not shy, because there are a grand total of 14 That's right, 14 Kirby games on the Nintendo Switch. But amongst all these games, I think a lot of people can agree the standout is clearly Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. Technically, this wasn't the first time Kirby was in 3D. You could argue that Kirby and the Crystal Shards on the Nintendo 64 was the first time that Kirby was in 3D. The only issue was you can still only move from left to right, so it was still basically just a 2D Kirby game. But even though this was the first time that Kirby could move on a 3D plane, they nailed it. The way Kirby just moves around just feels so just natural. And Kirby's copy abilities are also so fun to play with, because yeah, there's the regular copy ability, but you're able to upgrade it, so you have something to work towards throughout the game. And I love that, because it keeps the game kind of fresh in itself, and it really makes you feel like you're progressing. But here's what makes this game so great, because they just totally could have stopped there and everybody would have been happy. But they didn't. They had one more big feature, and it was a new mode called Mouthful Mode, where basically some items are just a little bit too big for Kirby to swallow, so they just kind of get stuck in his mouth. Visually, it looks stupid, and that is what I love about it, because it's just so silly, but also so useful. But between the copy abilities and the Mouthful Mode, it just keeps the gameplay fresh throughout the entire game, and that's just why it's one of my favorite games on Switch. The next game I want to talk about is Metroid Dread. I was first exposed to Metroid because of Smash Bros, as probably many people can probably relate. And although Metroid is technically a key franchise for Nintendo, it never rose to popularity like other IPs such as Mario, Legend of Zelda, or Splatoon. And I personally had never played a Metroid game before this one, so when I first saw the trailer for Metroid Dread, I knew I wanted to pick it up to give it a go, but what I didn't know is how fantastic this game was going to be. I was genuinely shocked how much I enjoyed this game. At first, a lot of people were trying to write off this game because it was a 2.5D game, and a lot of people basically took offense that for a full price game, why can I only move from left to right? But honestly, don't let that opinion fool you. This game is phenomenal. The environment is just so moody and dark, and some of the moments in this game are just so intense. For instance, when you encounter Emmys, the Emmys are genuinely horrifying. And as I'm trying to run away from them, I can feel myself just gripping harder and harder on my controller and getting so tensed up. This game genuinely converted me into a Metroid fan. I can't wait for Metroid 6 now. So yeah, don't let the price sticker fool you. This is definitely one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch. Next up, we have to talk about Pokemon. Because Pokemon has been so weird on the Nintendo Switch. Because during the Switch's life, literally every single Pokemon mainline game has came with its own controversy. Well, almost every Pokemon on Switch period has came with controversy, but that's beside the point. But even though there isn't a single perfect Pokemon game on the Switch, Pokemon Legends Arceus still finds a way to shine, despite its issues. But I'll be honest, at first I did not know what to think about this game. Sinnoh was the first region I've ever visited in the Pokemon universe, and for that reason, Gen 4 really has a really deep place in my heart. And I knew remakes of these games were inevitable, and I was kind of looking forward to it, but deep down I knew I had to be scared. But when it came time for us to go back to Sinnoh, Pokemon went all out. Not only did we get remakes of Diamond and Pearl, but we also got a new spin-off game. But even though the remakes were pretty much just a dud, they decided to try something completely new with Pokemon Legends Arceus, and it paid off. You know, yes, the game can have frame rate issues, and no, this isn't a true open world. And yes, the zones can be kind of lackluster, but the core gameplay loop is just so fun. You know, going around and having the Pokemon actually be, vicious, like a true, wild animal, made the game just feel in itself more serious. Because for the first time ever in a Pokemon game, you, the trainer, can actually die. And the battles themselves were just slightly tweaked. They weren't anything revolutionary, but I really feel like it was a step in the right direction. Being able to swap from agile style to strong style, and sometimes being able to attack twice in a row, or sometimes you get attacked twice in a row. It just made the battles feel more dynamic and fun, and considering that Kalos is my second favorite Pokemon region, needless to say, I'm really excited for Pokemon Legends Z to A. But before we move on to the next game, I have a very short message. If this is your first time here, hey, my name's Acadrien, and I post weekly Nintendo videos. So if you enjoyed what you watched so far, I would greatly appreciate it if you would simply consider to like and subscribe. And with that out of the way, let's go right back into the video. Next, we're going to talk about a more recent Nintendo franchise, because I believe Splatoon 3 is another one of Nintendo's best games on Switch. Splatoon had a very rocky start on the Wii U, but it's not because the franchise itself was bad, it was just due to the poor reception of the Wii U itself. But fast forward to the Nintendo Switch and Splatoon is thriving. And although I am a big fan of Splatoon, I'm definitely not the biggest fan of Splatoon, so I have no idea what the Splatoon community technically thinks about this. I don't know if they prefer Splatoon 2 or Splatoon 3, but personally I think Splatoon 3 is a bit better, simply because I feel like Splatoon 2 feels more like Splatoon 1.5, and Splatoon 3 feels like a true sequel. But there is one thing that unites all three of these games together, and that is that Nintendo took the release now and finish the game later approach with all three of these games really. Because at the beginning of all of these games, the content felt, a little sheer, I guess you could say. But fast forward to 2024 and these games are just jam-packed with content, especially Splatoon 3. Another thing that's great about this game is that you don't have to wait for specific times to go do some salmon runs. They just made this a permanent feature to which it probably just always should have been, but nonetheless I'm glad it's here now. But yeah, Splatoon is just the perfect format with the 3-minute matches. Me and my friends call all the time, and because the matches are just so short, it doesn't feel like you're committing that much, which just makes it so much easier for us to actually hop in and play. If we just want to play a few matches, that's perfectly fine. If we want to play all night, we can do that too. And that's just talking about the online modes. We haven't even talked about Table Turf, or the single player game, or even the DLC for this game. There's just so much to see and do in this game, and that's why it's just one of my absolute favorite Switch games. The next game we're going to talk about had a rocky start, and that game is Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Because this game originally came out for the Wii U, and a lot of people just didn't vibe with it. But I don't think it's because it's a bad game, because trust me, it's far from being a bad game. It was just the wrong game at the wrong time. People were expecting more in a 3D Mario than a glorified version of Super Mario 3D Land, because they wanted a Mario game that would really make the Wii U shine, and it just wasn't what people were wanting at that moment. And even when it was announced that it was going to be coming to Switch, people were just too ready to write it off. Most people just saw this as an overpriced Wii U port, and although I do understand where people are coming from, I just do not agree with that. There are so many just well-designed levels, and so many fun power-ups to play with. Like personally my favorite is the cat bell, and I also really enjoy how you get to pick what Mario character you want to be, because I remember playing New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and I hated it so much that I couldn't be Yellow Toad if I was player 1, but it's also fun that every character just plays slightly different as well, and the music in this game is just so freaking good. And even though they just could have left it right there, and personally I feel like it is worth the money just for the base game itself, they also included Bowser's Fury, and this game is phenomenal. And genuinely, I feel like it could probably be the future of the Mario franchise. It's just so clever how it's kind of like an open world, but there's just so many little islands that are set up with platforming to explore. And honestly, the only negative thing I have to say about Bowser's Fury is it's too short. I mean, of course it was going to be short, it's just a side mode, but man, I really hope they capitalize on that and they make a full-fledged game like this. And because of all of these reasons, I consider Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury one of the best games on the Nintendo Switch. The next game I want to talk to you guys about is actually another Mario game, and that game is Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Because let me tell you, the Switch has two 2D Mario games, and you are objectively making the wrong choice if you pick New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. Actually, I shouldn't say that, you can like what you like. But the way I look at both of these games is it's kind of like baking a cake. One of these games, you can tell the love and soul that was poured into making this just decadent cake. And then the other one, it's like you started to bake the cake, gave up, ate a spoonful of flour, and just called it a day. But on a serious note, Super Mario Bros. Wonder is just so good. For me, it's genuinely like consuming a piece of art. Because the game oozes in charisma. Whether it be the animation of the enemies or the characters themselves, the level design is just so fun. And quite literally, every single level has multiple endings with the Wonder Flowers. For me, I personally thought I was just done with 2D Mario, but this game just reinvigorated my love for them. And although a lot of people complain that there wasn't any DLC for this, I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Because I look at it this way, would you add something to the Mona Lisa? No, of course you wouldn't, because she's just perfect as she is. It's already a complete work of art. And again, personally, I think in instances like this, we just need to appreciate that Nintendo sold us a complete package and that they didn't like hold anything to just upcharge us later. But yeah, if you haven't checked out this game yet, I strongly recommend you do. Another game that's just the cream of the crop on Switch is The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And of course, we can't talk about Tears of the Kingdom without mentioning Breath of the Wild, because Switch and Breath of the Wild are basically synonymous with each other. Breath of the Wild was a phenomenon within the gaming industry. The concept of just seeing something far off in the distance and being able to just walk there, while also having your Sheikah Slate that had so many fun abilities with it, it was almost too easy to sink in multiple hundreds of hours in this game. It was genuinely hard to imagine Nintendo could ever top this game, but in my opinion, they did. And by all means, I know it's not a perfect game, but I feel like a lot of the critiques that this game got was is more like nitpicks rather than actual genuine critiques. Honestly, that's its own can of worms I could deep dive in, but the point I'm trying to make is that for me, trigger warning, for me, I feel like Tears of the Kingdom builds on the base of Breath of the Wild very well. Because if you look at Hyrule itself, between Hyrule, the new caves, the sky, and the underground, depending on how you want to calculate it, there's anywhere between 2.5 to 3 times more Hyrule to explore. And while exploring, you have just a whole new set of tools. Between the Ascend, or the Fusion tool, or even Recall, I feel like these tools are just a step up from what we had with the Sheikah Slate in Breath of the Wild. So because of all these reasons, Tears of the Kingdom is one of my absolute favorite games on the Nintendo Switch. But before moving on to the next section, I just want to talk about 2 more games right quick. First, it's Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, because it's the best-selling game on Switch for a very good reason. There's just so much content and just fun to have with this game. But although there is a lot of fun to have with this game, I'm personally not the biggest fan of it. You know, I had a Wii U and I had Mario Kart 8, and even back then, even when there was barely anything to play, I still chose to not play this game and I bought it. I don't know why, but the game just never clicked with me. Of course, if my friends want to play, I'll absolutely play with them. It's not a bad game by all means, it's just not my favorite. And another game you might notice is missing off of this list is Super Mario Odyssey. And again, it's just, I know objectively it is a phenomenal game. It is a game that is beloved by so many people, but the game just simply did not resonate with me. You know, I played through it twice. The first time I almost beat the game, then I played it again, and I did enjoy it a lot more the second time, but it's still just not in my top 10 games. But with the honorable mentions out of the way, let's go right into the last game on my list, and that game is none other than Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. And here's the thing about this game, I talked about this game on my channel before, and I'm standing by my approach to this game. This game is best experienced when you know the least amount about it. So I'm not going to tell you anything about it. The only thing I'm going to say is if you do actually genuinely enjoy it, of course there's Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 as well. And now that we know that Xenoblade Chronicles X is coming, there's plenty of Xenoblade Chronicles content on the Switch if you do enjoy the first one. I personally played 1, 2, and 3 on the Switch, and I do own Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Wii U, but I never played it. And I do plan on picking it up and playing through it on the Switch when it comes out. But among the 3 that I've played, I think that the first one has the best story, because when it was originally written, it was supposed to be its own standalone game. There wasn't supposed to be any sequels. So because of that, it really had no limitations or things it had to abide by. Whereas the sequels are still very good, don't get me wrong, but naturally because they are sequels, they still need to tie into the original story somehow, so they are kind of confined in that aspect. It's really not bad, that's not what I'm saying at all, but all I'm saying is that you should really take my word and just go for it if you've never played this game before, and that's it. But with all that being said, I want you to let me know down in the comments, what's your favorite game on the Nintendo Switch? And until next time, Waddell.